My name, for those who don't know me, is Heath Ludde. My wife and Jessica and I, along with our two sons, Evan and John, moved to Bedford and joined St. Paul's 4 years ago. Jess has worked with the Sunday school program and is a member of the Green Team. Evan as a torchbearer, John as maybe part of the youth choir in the future, and I serve as a lay Eucharistic minister and now with the middle school youth group. I was born and raised in the Episcopal Church, attending St. Michael's and St. George in St. Louis for essentially my entire childhood. My father was an usher, I sang in the youth choir, and my brother and I both served as acolytes from the moment we were allowed to. When Jess and I were first married and living in South Boston, we tried several different churches of various denominations, never really finding a good fit. When we moved to Stoneham, we found Parish of the Epiphany in Winchester, which is a very nice church and has a very wonderful congregation. But something was still missing. The sense of community that we were looking for wasn't quite there. When we moved to Bedford and started coming to St. Paul's, we knew we had found a church home. One of the questions that Chris suggested that I consider as I wrote this sermon was, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was, what is it about the Episcopal Church that drew you to it as opposed to another Christian denomination? My first reaction was, it was what I was raised in. It's what I'd known all my life. The services were comfortable and fairly predictable. The Episcopalians I've met throughout my life had been good people. And why wouldn't I continue with it, given that I'd had a positive experience? However, in giving the subject some more thought, I think there was and continues to be a deeper reason: inclusion. At the time that Jess and I were looking at our church options, primarily between 2004 and 2007, one of the biggest issues facing us as a society was marriage equality. It was an issue I was wrestling with too. I had been taught a certain way my entire religious life, but it didn't seem to match with the teachings of Jesus. The Episcopal Church was one of, if not the first, to recognize gay marriage, even in the face of tremendous pressure not to. This type of openness to all is what I love about the Episcopal Church, and it is the primary factor that draws me to it. Now, when Paul first approached me several months ago and asked if I'd ever considered giving the stewardship sermon, I said no. Of course, I was thinking, oh no. Part of my reservation for agreeing to speak today was that I haven't been a member of St. Paul's for very long. The previous three stewardship speakers, Candy, Paul, and Carrie, have been with this church and in this community for decades. We moved here 4 years ago. What did I have to say that could compare with their experiences? But as I sat down to start working on a first draft, I realized that maybe my perspective could add to theirs. I think there are quite a few families here who moved from out of town or even out of state, families with young children who were looking for a new church family. It is for you all that I feel my speaking today is important. Some of you may have come here from another church, Episcopal or otherwise, as we did, and some may have been non-practicing or were never religious before. The common theme with all of us is that we were looking for a place where we could feel welcome, where we could explore our faith within a community, where we could grow spiritually, and where we had a free hour of daycare. Whatever our paths were, they all led us eventually here to St. Paul's. It is a testament to the goodness of the leadership and congregation here that what we found was exactly what we were looking for. There are so many opportunities for doing good here. From the Advent Fair to the Appalachian Service Project, from the morning greeters and Sunday school teachers, and so many more, there are ways to be involved for everyone, regardless of prior experience. While these opportunities provide a practical purpose, they are also, and perhaps more importantly, a way to deepen our own faith. As I mentioned before, one of the ways that I chose to get involved was to be a lay Eucharistic minister. Having served and/or sung in most every church service I attended growing up, it frankly feels more normal to be up here watching the service than out there. I figured it'd be a comfortable way to help out. I wasn't looking for or expecting anything to affect my personal faith. Now, I've read the Bible several times, both in whole and in sections, but I was very surprised to realize how much more I learned and how much more powerful the words were from reading the passages aloud. I feel maybe a bit of a sense of ownership of the passages after I've read them. I know that most everyone here has participated in at least one of these ministries, and I would encourage you all to try out at least one more, especially for those of us who are new to the church. You might just find a spiritual connection that you weren't even looking for. For all of the good these programs do, there is one method of involvement that stands above all the rest, and it happens to be the most simple: making an annual pledge. This isn't to say it's the easiest. Jess and I know well, having 2 children, there are financial obligations around every corner. Deciding to make a pledge for us was a process. There were questions. Should we pledge? Could we pledge? How much should we pledge? I think we ended up taking several months to come to a conclusion. But I cannot begin to tell you how happy I am that we did. You see, most, if not all, of the other opportunities here don't exist without this. St. Paul's has had an incredible participation rate in recent years. It's over 90%, which is fantastic. This year, I hope we can get a little bit closer to 100%. It's a goal worth pursuing, and it's one we have the ability to make possible. Reverend Chris gave a homily earlier this summer about St. Matthew's parable of the wheat and tares. And while it isn't the main point of the parable or of Chris's sermon at the time, I found myself thinking that a single blade of wheat, or even a few blades together, are more vulnerable than a tightly knit group. I can honestly say that of all the church communities I have been a part of, there is not one that rivals St. Paul's in this regard. This truly is an example of the whole being more than the sum of its parts. The people are the church. You look around you, you look left, and you look right. This is your church. We come to this building together to strengthen those bonds. And while the building is beautiful, it is those bonds that make us a church. The pledge we make to the church is our promise to each other to make sure that it will continue to grow. Finally, I'd like to end with an excerpt of a prayer written by Bill Thomas. He was an Episcopal priest in St. Louis who taught at my high school and who passed away 2 weeks ago. Because life is often short and always unpredictable, let us resolve to try to care for each other more than we sometimes do, to try to understand each other more fully than we think we have time for, and to make the most of what we have. Thank you. Amen.